Welcome to the ClassCast Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Tibbens. Today, we'll be speaking with Iman Ghanizada, the Certs Guy, who is the author of the Google Cloud Certified Professional Cloud Architect All-in-One Exam Guide. He is a cloud security leader at Google Cloud. He is also a former student of mine. And when I saw that Iman had a book coming out and is working on some great educational opportunities, I thought this is a guy I got to talk to, right? Because you are approaching education from a different angle than I am. But in the end, I think the end goals are probably very similar, right? So I appreciate you taking some time to talk because I know you're a very busy guy between your work at Google, your book, and all the rest you're working on. How you doing today?
Doing absolutely well, Mr. T. I'm super thrilled to be here. So, for the folks listening in, this is kind of it was weird joining this call. I was like, do I call him Ryan? Do I call him Mr. T? I was like, he's always going to be Mr. T to me. Like, it's just not. It's just kind of weird to call him by his first name now that I'm an adult. But hey, it's been 15 years since we last saw each other, right? That was your
Yeah.
first year of education, right? So let's kind of go back to that year when you started. How was that first year of education for you?
Yeah, I mean, for me, first year as a teacher it's a lot of scrambling. Like I got made fun of a lot by other teachers and some of the assistant principals because I was usually the last person in the building except for the custodians, unless there was a big sporting event, like 3 or 4 nights a week, I'd be there late. And in retrospect, there's part of me where I'm like, just, you got a contract for a certain amount of time, dummy. They're not paying you, go home. At the same time, I'm a better teacher today because I put in the time and, I sort of got things. I don't know. I'm a big fan of it. If you're going to do it right, do it as
Right,
well as you
right.
can. And so if you hold yourself to that standard early on, you probably save yourself a lot of trouble later on. But I think a lot of the success in my career, especially early on, but still now, had to do with building relationships. And that's where reaching out to you, I think, was maybe easier than maybe it would have been for some other teachers because I want to say made the effort, but it wasn't like work. It's just a natural thing for me. But you want to know the people you're working with. And so I always try to build good relationships with students. And that's where you, as a charismatic and enthusiastic guy, you're funny in class, but very smart dude. I thought, hey, this is someone who's doing things now. I don't know if I would say I would have predicted you publishing books and being a leader at Google, but I also could tell you if we went back 15 years and you told me, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised by it. So what did that look like from your
Yeah,
side? Like how did high school go for you?
yeah, no, dude. The thing I really like about you is very memorable. I've got you as one of my top teachers. It's between you and Mr. Joe's. Okay, by the way, the tech
Nice.
ed.
Nice. That's good. That's good.
Legend.
I've heard his name a couple times. That's a good one.
He's the legend, man. I freaking love that guy. So I'm thinking about, ninth grade, I think it was when I was doing English, right? And all my school, like I've always been, it's been interesting, right? I've been, uh, you know, having many friends, very social, cool guy circles, all that sort of stuff. But then at the same time, getting straight A's, nailing, school, doing all that. And then at the same time, avoiding everybody after school because I'm sitting there, on the computer all day, gaming or hacking or doing whatever the hell I was doing back then. But the thing I liked about you a lot was when teachers come in to teach a set of students, right? It's very easy for teachers to come in and want to teach the best students, right? The kids that are disciplined, the kids that want to listen, that come with their notes ready. But if you're able to teach the kids like me who just want to cause trouble and make everyone laugh around you and whatnot, then I think you're a great teacher because at the end of the day, it's part of influence is about relationship building, right? And if you really want to be an influence to the kids that are in your class, you have to know how to connect with them. You have to know how to connect with the kids who are both straight A students and super studious. And you have to know how to connect with the kids who don't really care to be there, right? And if you make someone your friend, I think it just makes you a better educator and a better influencer. And I think that's something you did really well.
I appreciate that, and I think about it now, like I'm now far enough into my career that not that you ever, get to pick your classes per se, but I can state a preference and I feel like people at least listen to it. And I always say I want the top and the bottom. Like I like you can, and almost every year they'll put together a class of the kids who they're most worried about or who really just don't want to be there. And I get like the toughest class you can imagine. And then I want the AP kids, and whether they're organized or not, like I like to think and teach it at a high level. I also like working with kids who don't really want to be there, because if you have to be here, you might as well get something out of it. And it's the job of the teacher to show you what you're getting out of it, right? So thinking about for you in terms of the work you're doing now, publishing a book that's going to help other people to get certification, and also thinking about creating a brand with the Certs Guy. This is something that can help a lot of people, and as you pointed out, some of this is based on relationships, and some of this is maybe what I had said about sort of showing people value. To you, what caused that shift? Like, what took you from solely focused on the technology and cloud security, that kind of stuff, back to the idea of helping other people to gain some of these skills? Like, where did that shift come for you?
So I like to think about the real world is not much different than the classroom, right? Like there's a bunch of knuckleheads. There's a bunch of people that are super smart, that are holding it down for everybody else. They're the leaders. There are all the personalities in the classroom exist in the real world, right?
Yep.
And so, I mean, even just kind of talking about what I'm doing with the education side in the book, I'm taking a lot of what you did in that classroom, right? Being able to build influence with kids all across the board, and I sort of employ that same thing in my career and in the book as well. But where this all had sort of pivoted was I actually never thought that I would be writing a book, let alone like, okay, maybe I always imagined, at like age 50 or something, like, when like a politician gets really popular and stuff, and they're like, here's my memoir.
Yeah, cash in on that memoir real quick.
Yeah, exactly. Here's my book deal. I'm going to get, 40 million of my followers to now buy my bullshit book just because I wrote it, I always imagine.
I can only dream.
Yeah. I always imagine that like it would happen like late on in life, I'd be like, all right, it's time to check the box and write a book, right? But I've always dreamed of being able to, help other people. I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to helping. If you're someone that wants to help, a lot of times, you think making impact is, I wrote this in one of my posts the other day. You think making impact is starting a big nonprofit and having millions of dollars of funding to use in all places in the world. But really, helping others kind of starts with the way you approach other people. And I got to a point in my career where, I got a bunch of certs. I'm doing, really well in my career. I've been ahead of the curve for most people my age, thankfully. But I'm at a point in my career where I kind of want to help outsource my knowledge a bit. I want to spend more time helping others, investing in others. And this book opportunity just kind of came to, it just came naturally, like I was working on a big project at work. I'm trying to really build strong relationships with the people around me, and kind of going back to what I said earlier, right? The workforce is the same thing as the classroom, right? You've got people from different personalities, different challenges, different backgrounds, all that sort of stuff. If you know how to build influence, things just kind of come naturally, right? Yeah. So thinking about building influence, I was like, okay, how do you build influence in the workforce, right? Something I think I've done just since an early age. I really focus on building the relationships with people, right? You build good relationships with people, good things come your way, right? So it was one really good relationship that had connected me to, another relationship that had this relationship with McGraw-Hill. One thing led to another. Next thing McGraw-Hill and I were talking. Google was on board. Everything was kind of off to the races at that point.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like I'm going to become an educator, and that's still not my career trajectory. Like, I'm not trying to become an educator. It's really, I just want to help people, and with the time I have in my life, and that's going to make me a more well-rounded person in everything else I do in my career.
Yeah, and you've hit a point where maybe you have the expertise in what you're doing that you can share that. And I think that's something that maybe public schools we lack a little bit, is that you have career switchers is the term they use for people who go and do something else, work in an industry, and then later on switch and become a teacher. And I think that in some cases that's really good, because they bring the quote unquote real world knowledge. Like, they know how to apply the things they're teaching. That's great. but I also don't know that we necessarily have a system that like allows those people to fully use their experience. You've got a curriculum, you've got these standards, you've got this test, you've got whatever. So while those people maybe can provide some more perspective or a broader view of how to apply this knowledge or these skills, that's great. I don't know that we fully capitalize on people with that experience. For you, you're still working at Google, right? And so you're working at Google, you get hooked up with McGraw-Hill, which is one of the biggest, textbook and education publishing companies in the country. And you're now sort of sharing your expertise with other people. I think that's awesome. And obviously there's a profit to be made, but I think that even bigger than that, there's this opportunity, as you pointed out, for the influence of sort of taking the things you've learned and helping other people. And I would like to believe that's what most teachers think they're doing, right? That I have this knowledge, I have these skills, and I can support other people with it. If for you, thinking broad in the concept of education, for me, I think of education not just as school, but it's the sum total of all the things you learn in your life. It's all the stuff that can empower you and uplift you and maybe the community that you live in. Thinking about education in that broad sense, for you, what is the purpose of it? Like, you want to help people to do what? Like, what's the outcome that you see for the people who get the book or who follow the Certs Guy? What is it you're helping people to actually do?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, right? So I'm thinking about, sort of how I grew up. I was luckily I was born in the States, so I already by default have it a lot easier than so many other people. But growing up, my parents, they came from Afghanistan. They, as many other friends of mine and people all over the world that are displaced and came from war-torn countries, or they immigrated here. Starting in this country from scratch, right, with absolutely nothing, it's not easy, and growing up, right, it's like you don't have access to the same tools that other kids have access to. You don't have access to the same hardware other people have access to. You don't have access to the same schooling, to anything, right? I mean, your family, even your parents, like dad's busy working 3 different jobs trying to put money on the table, and you don't have your father to sit there and teach you about all the things about finance and about investing and about taxes and about all these things that other kids probably have their parents to teach them for, right? So as I'm kind of growing up through life, I'm realizing that I've spent a ton of time just trying to crowdsource my own knowledge from the internet, right? Luckily, we have this fascinating, incredible tool called the internet. It is the greatest thing of our lifetime. And I'm going to go off on a tangent real quick, but think about this, okay? For the last 2.9 million years of human existence, right? Humans, whatever, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, Homo deus, whatever generation, all the way back, right? I think like the 90s and maybe probably the late 90s, early 2000s was the start, especially with Google, right? Was the start of probably the biggest transformation in learning and knowledge for this entire existence of this planet, right?
Yeah. That's it's funny when you put it that way. Like, yeah, what would be those moments? It's like we capture fire. 60,000 years ago, people get fire. 10,000 years ago, people figure out how to farm, which means you can live in a town or a city. You don't have to keep moving. And then I don't know, it's what, 400 or 500 years ago. I forget the year, 400 or 500 years ago, you get a printing press. Mm-hmm. And then during our lifetimes, we get the internet. Like, like it's one of those like top 5 things that changes everything about what we do. And when I talk to my students today and I try to describe, because I'm like the old end of the millennial generation, like we're same generation, but I'm at the very old end of it, right? I remember going to school without the internet, and I remember going to school with the internet. And kids today, I try to describe it, and they really can't grasp, like, they don't understand like a card catalog in a library and things like this. Like it's just, they look at me like I'm an alien. And you're right, like we're in the middle of that. And so if you're thinking about it in the broad term, what do we do with it? And you're saying like, all the things you do or don't have access to in 2.9 million years, we're lucky enough to land in the spot with this transformation. What does that mean?
Yeah. So So I want to keep going on this tangent, but I want to share what the original question you asked is, what's the purpose of all this, real quick. So,
Yeah.
just in short, growing up through life, right? Very, very, very different perspective of how I learned, how I grew, the struggles I had to kind of face and overcome. And to date, still, right, being an Afghan American, right, is a challenge in the States when everybody looks at you and thinks you're a terrorist, right? It's crazy how we had to grow up. So I'm thinking, if I have, thankfully I'm at a point in my career where I'm confident in my skill set, I'm going to keep growing. But if there's anything I can do to help anyone around me, right, especially those from underrepresented groups, and marginalized communities, right, these are the folks I really want to impact, right? And that's kind of my purpose behind everything I'm doing now. And it's not my primary job, it's not my day job, but I have noticed that even within my community of friends, as I start to share more information, I'm getting people that are very interested in listening, right? And that it's helping. And I've had so many people reach out, and tell me that something I've told them helped them out, helped them move on in their careers and in their lives. And I think that the moment it really hit me was when I had announced this book deal, right? I posted on LinkedIn, Facebook, all these things, dude. I don't even open Facebook, like, unless it has to do with like something like this professional, right?
Yeah.
I wish Facebook didn't exist. Like,
Yeah, it used to be my favorite, and it is fading fast.
Yeah.
That's
So
you treat it like I treat LinkedIn. I'm like, I put up podcast stuff, and that's about it. Like,
yeah. So when I posted this message on LinkedIn, and all these groups, man, I just shared like literally the most brief snippet of my life, and I had people from all over the world, like countries in Africa, countries in Asia, in Europe, people from all different backgrounds that reached out and were like, wow, I am so inspired and I want to do something better about my life. Like, I want to keep listening. Please continue sharing. I'd love to follow your insights. And like, that's the moment where, I've always been kind of flying under the radar. I've always been kind of quiet. I'm in cybersecurity. We don't like to talk too much. But it was that moment in life where I realized that, hey, if I want to make an impact, right, it just kind of starts with even the most smallest gesture, just sharing and just helping. And anyways, that's my kind of mission.
to go to that sort of long view of it, you are situated both as a person who has a life story that can inspire some people, but equally importantly, you have the technical certifications, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you've made the most, you are making the most of the time that we're living in. And so, like, what does that part mean? So you have now, the knowledge and the backstory to inspire people, to help people, but it's also a different thing. If you could be in the same situation, obviously the technology would be different, but you could be the same guy 50 years ago and you wouldn't be able to have the same impact, right? You wouldn't have the reach.
Exactly.
And so what does that mean today? Like, how do we capitalize on this? How does that influence the way we think about helping people or connecting with others?
So think about this, kind of going back to that, the rambling of philosophy, right? I mean, even I love, and I'm gonna go here, all right. But I love how even in 2021, we have so many people that seem to think that we have progressed so much further than we did just 30 years ago, right? Just 30 years, not even 30 years ago. When I was young, it was okay to, women were held back from their careers. It was okay to be homophobic. It was okay to be racist. Like, all these things were so normal just when I was growing up, right? And this is like at the early onset of the internet, right? So you think about how knowledge has really transformed today. Now the fact that these communities are being built and people are all aligning on the universal source of knowledge, right? What it means to be moral, what it means to be ethical, what it means to be progressive, right? This is really fundamentally changing the way we learn, and for the better. But 30 years ago, 50 years ago, right? Even when I was growing up as a kid, you wanted to learn, right? Where did you get your knowledge from? You went to the library. That's cool. Okay. You had to make sure you found the right author, the right book. You had to make sure you were going to a library in probably the right part of the country, right? The sources of news you're getting knowledge from. I talk about this in the book a little bit. News was like when the radio, it was the radio, right? There was first the news, like the newsletter. They had paper news, all that stuff. Propaganda would spread, and then as it evolved, there's the radio, and you listen to the radio, and you realize that you think Japanese people are bad. You think Vietnam is a place we need to go to war at because that's all they're saying on the news. And then you've got the television, and you've got CNN and Fox that are two polarized news entities that are just basically spouting their own agendas, completely polarized, right? And everyone listens to these people as influences, right? It was the internet that came around, the internet that was like, hey, you know what? You don't have to listen to CNN or Fox anymore. You don't have to listen to the person speaking on the radio, and you don't have to listen to the person who wrote the freaking the newsletter.
Yeah, the guy handing out the trash flyers in town square.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's a huge decentralization of knowledge, of influence, really, right? Like anybody can sort of grab at that if you have the right things to say, or can sort of capture people's attention and imagination. Is that all good?
So there's a couple challenges with this whole thing, right? So this whole rapid movement to technology has both unlocked a world of knowledge where we can go and gather information from wherever, whenever. It can be credibly sourced and cited, and it can be, it can be crowdsourced, vetted by crowds, vetted by individuals, vetted by multiple researchers all over the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But also, obviously, it has introduced some risks, right? With these big, massive social gatherings, we also have algorithms that can, now funnel you down into, this hole of what you're reading and what you're researching, and now you're only getting fed that information, right? Some companies are notorious for this. I'm not going to speak on behalf of anyone. I think everyone in the tech industry, from my experience, is trying to do the best for the world. I mean, the people I work with at Google, it's incredible how strong their moral compasses are. The people I've seen in every tech company I've been, it's incredible how strong how their moral compass affects their ability to think about building an inclusive space, right? But the biggest challenge is that with a capitalist market, the end result is to make more money. And if you think about it, make more money in today's world means more engagement, more likes, more shares, more comments. It's not, more subscriptions, maybe for companies like Netflix and stuff.
Yeah.
But for other companies, it's not. So now you're getting all these people to, like, how do we actually get people into thinking about
with all that, though, real quick, because I think about this a lot with this podcast, because I know for a fact, like, I've done this long enough. I've now made some connections with people who run other podcasts. I could get more clicks. My numbers could jump up if I cut the 60 to 90 minute episode down to 30. I know that I could do, if I went more sort of rah-rah school and just, say things that help a teacher to, improve an activity in their classroom, to that would get me more clicks. My thing is, like, one, other people do that, and I think probably do it pretty well. But two, I don't know that makes things better in the broad sense. And I'm under no illusions. I don't think, the world's going to change because I did a podcast, but I'm trying to facilitate a conversation that aligns with some words that you just used, and that also that I think are used in some of your promo materials. Like, I saw them on your website. It's there in the book, in the preview and the summary of the book. Like, you use the words moral and ethical, and the word responsible comes up repeatedly. And that's a big part of what I'm trying to do here, is thinking, like, if we are serious and sincere about making school better, or education in the broad sense better, then we need to sort of keep that sense of morality and justice as part of it. We also need to open the floor and hear those other opposing views. And so in the tech field, I think, as you said, there's a lot of people who are doing that, and the people you work with, you're impressed by. I also think that if you ask, 100 people from the general public who don't have much connection to the tech industry, I don't know if those are the words they're going to throw around. I think that there's a growing distrust, and I don't know if that's, I don't like the idea of distrust, but critical thinking, like a little bit of skepticism, is probably healthy. When you think about the changes we're seeing in media, the changes we're seeing in education, the access to information, when you talk about being moral, being ethical, being responsible, what does that mean? Like, how can you help people in this space and still align with those values?
So think about that concept of how morality was introduced to humans, right? It was like, this early ideas of religion. There was millions of them that came to be, and over the years, humans started to fine tune these things. And then they realized that a lot of these are heavily politicized, and people follow this belief system, and it's got many flaws, right? And so as humans started to get smarter and smarter and smarter, and I mean, even until 50 years ago, I don't think that even our parents' generation was anywhere near as progressive as we are, right? It was really this generation of the internet that introduced the idea of actually being equal, right? And what it means to be equal, right? And it wasn't until probably even till Obama came into office is when everything really started rapidly changing, right? That people started thinking about, what does it actually mean to be moral and ethical, right? Because 20 years ago, it was totally fine to exclude certain groups out of the world, out of success, out of opportunities, right? And as long as you were donating money to charity, you were a good moral person, right? I mean,
Right.
think about like the Constitution, right? The Constitution talks about, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and all these things. Meanwhile, African Americans were enslaved.
Yeah.
How are you going to talk about freedom and equality and all these incredible topics? Meanwhile, you're enslaving an entire population of
Yeah,
people.
millions of people, and we always, that's how that conversation goes, and that's good. Like, the one that I feel like was the biggest blind spot for me growing up was that 51%, give or take, of the population is female, and they didn't get to vote, early on, couldn't own property and the rest. And you're right that there's a greater awareness for it. We've been talking about equality and justice since the Enlightenment, but maybe we're getting closer to doing it, and it's not easy, and we're still not doing it, but we're on the way there. How do we continue that? Like, how do we continue that? I mean, if we think things are moving in the right direction, obviously there's some momentum in technology, there's some momentum in education, that people are having this discussion about bringing those moral aspects in, about being inclusive with it. Where do we go from here?
Yeah. So think about, it's funny, I was always a Star Wars type of guy. I never was a Star Trek type of guy, because Star Trek was like, the 70s and 80s and stuff. And, too low budget for me. No, I'm kidding. But I was having this conversation with this guy, and he talked to me a little bit about Star Trek. And it was actually fascinating, because now I talk about this concept a lot. In Star Trek, you look at the Starship Enterprise, right? And there are people from literally every background you can imagine, every race, every gender, every ethnicity, whatever. And they're all on the same ship working together. They see each other as equal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because humanity for once came together to fight a greater cause. And that greater cause was everything in the galaxy, right?
Right.
And so we think about humans, right? The day we get to a path of equality is when, humans truly bind together from different countries, different continents, all over the world. We're seeing a lot of this with the rise of social networking and all that sort of stuff, all these constructs that are being formed. As humans find more and more and more and more ways to integrate among each other, they're going to start to look at each other as if they're looking at themselves. And so where does that take us, right? That takes us to a more connected, globally connected planet. And a big piece of this is actually going to be, this maybe, like I said, I have some crazy, wild beliefs, but the idea of decentralization. So with blockchain, right? with cryptocurrency, when we start to introduce fully decentralized networks where there are no central ruling powers that control them, is when we're going to start seeing humans collaborating from all over the world. And Bitcoin is exactly this, right? That's why Bitcoin is so fascinating, because Bitcoin, you've got people from every country in the world that is all collaborating and aligning to one belief system, right? A decentralized belief system. Right. So where we're headed from here is fascinating, because as technology evolves, right, we've got the education component. We've got people that are, feeling more empowered to speak about what it means to be treated equally, right? We've got the idea of representation. Representation is so important, right? Just like I talked about the Star Trek Enterprise, right? Starship Enterprise. Representation is so important because you start to crowdsource these beliefs from people who have all these different backgrounds, and you've got blind spots that you've never thought about, right? If you didn't grow up as an Afghan man or an African American woman, right? You've got all these different things that you don't think about in your day-to-day lives. So this is just kind of happening organically, and the people that are going to be successful are the people that adopt this belief and this mindset. And then the folks that are going to fall behind are the folks that don't catch on to it, that don't understand the value and the importance of it. Sort
of do the isolationist thing, like the keep to myself, or we, whatever, define we however you want, but we keep to ourselves. That's interesting. So you said something in there, and this is both a little bit to help listeners and probably a little bit to help me. I've had this conversation a couple times, but it's always been like part of a bigger conversation. And I'm curious, you're a tech guy, so I think maybe you can tell me this maybe in simple terms. I've heard the idea that blockchain technologies are going to allow for the decentralization of education. The idea that you have to go to a university and take all of your classes there. I talked to, I think her name was Megan O'Connor. She's the entrepreneur in residence at Kaplan, which is one of the biggest education companies in the world. And she actually said how she thinks the future of college is that people will essentially treat all the different colleges like menu items, and they're going to pick and choose from different schools to assemble the education they want. And I had a question about, how do you handle the credentials? And she's like, oh, there's some stuff. But I've heard people say that blockchain is something that would essentially allow you to do that, because it sort of certifies itself. But I don't understand what that means. So like, if you can help out me and the listeners, what is blockchain? Yeah. And is what I just said making any sense at all? Like,
yeah. So let me try to break it down pretty easily. And I'm no expert, but this is my philosophy, right? So, even I'll give you an example. What you're seeing in the news right now with GameStop, right? Mm-hmm. Everything that's happening in GameStop, this completely validates the need for blockchain, right? Because we've got a system where the people all want to align on purchasing, the share. They feel like they've done their research and they think that this is a great opportunity to buy into a company. But then you've got the ruling power. It's a central, this whole thing runs off of this central financial system that can really control and decide what people can and can't do, right?
Right.
And so, why are we trying to control how humans, what humans can do and can't do, right? This whole idea is we live in a free market, right? And blockchain is exactly that, right? With the internet, the rise of the internet and everything, the next internet 3.0, whatever you want to call it, is going to be a decentralized internet, because humans inherently, we want to be good people, right? We all, whether you're African American, whether you're Afghan, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, whether you're gay, whether you're straight, whatever it is, we all want to be good people at the end of the day. We all want to treat each other well at the end of the day. The challenge is that the ruling classes typically are the ones that see this as a threat to their existence. So as humans find more ways to integrate socially and evolve socially, it then becomes this battle of progression and, it's right and left, not right and left politically, but right and left from a progressive stance.
Right.
Okay. So going back to blockchain, right? The idea of blockchain is that you buy into it, you leverage a network that is not controlled by a single person, and it cannot be altered by a single person. So if For example, let's just say, Bitcoin, you and the rest of the world want to adopt that as the universal standard because billions of people or millions of people are using it all over the world. You get to buy into this and no one controls it. It is validated by every single person on the network, right? And the idea of a blockchain is that you're dishing off the responsibility to validating transactions to every single person that participates in the blockchain. So the bigger the blockchain is, the more people that are involved, the less likely it is to be, altered by a single group of people or anything like that. It takes the power out of one central.
So with this idea of decentralizing, networks and economies and the rest, how does that decentralization within education work? What value does that provide?
So the easy way to think about it, right, is right now the education system is designed by the Board of Education, which is handed down to the states, which is handed down to the counties, right? There's still one central authority that decides how we should learn in school, right? Mm-hmm. Humans, like going back to that point where I said humans, we inherently want to do good. We inherently want to be knowledgeable. We inherently want to help others, right? What if humans just bind together and they say, hey, you know what? A billion of us thought of an incredible education system for the world, right? Why don't we all just leverage that education system? And by the way, no one person is going to control it. We're all coming together and bringing all of our collective thoughts together to be a part of this network, this decentralized network. And because it's such a massively adopted network, it's very powerful. It's a very powerful way to learn.
So when we think about that in decentralizing, like right now, this is one of my top sort of topics for 2021 on the podcast is to learn more about the idea of like school choice. And I think increasing choice and freedom in a lot of ways is really good. I also know that sometimes if you don't work out the details well, school choice really just becomes something that benefits, rich kids or, people in the right neighborhoods, et cetera, which you can make the same criticism about a public school system. But thinking about this educationally, how does all of this work? Say, how does this empower an individual? For example, and this might be a little bit of a jump, but you're promoting a book that is about a certification, and I've heard a lot of people say that the future of education, particularly in the tech field, is more focused on certifications than degrees. That not to say you don't need a degree or something to get started, but that the idea of the certifications are actually the thing that keeps you current in your job. Is that the kind of thing we're talking about, that like the individual chooses the certifications that work best for them, as opposed to just having to get that prepackaged, Bachelor of Science degree? Like, is that kind of what we're looking at?
Yeah, so it depends on what which industry you're in. Every industry is very different, right? So for me, being in tech, like I said earlier, right? School is a great thing to build the cognitive skills and to build the mental endurance to be able to attack many different ways of thinking. Now, where in the tech industry, right, where it's you still need to have a well-rounded understanding of the world. It's going to make you better at your job, but the core of your job, your responsibilities, you're going to be able to achieve that doing projects. You're going to be able to achieve that doing certifications. You're going to be able to achieve that doing volunteer work, all that sort of stuff. You don't need a degree anymore. And to be honest, I mean, like I love Virginia Tech. I had an amazing time there, but my degree didn't give me any of the skills that I'm necessarily directly using. What it did give me is it gave me a lot of the skills that I'm indirectly applying as I'm thinking about problem solving and stuff, right? But there was nothing tangible that I actually employ in my career. Tech is very different than other industries. I can't speak on behalf of law or medicine or any of that. Like that's a lot more structured, but business, tech, all these things, there are many other ways to learn, and COVID is really rapidly accelerating this transition to virtual learning and online learning and whatnot.
Yeah. And, I mean, give or take somewhere around 62% of people who have a college degree do a job that isn't really what they studied for, so the idea that you need the college degree to get the interview or to get hired is very real. But I think a lot of people would tell you that they don't actually use most of what they learned, say in high school or in college.
Yeah.
Those aren't the things that you're directly using. Like you said, time management skills, your soft skills, working with other people. There's a lot of things. It's not saying it's useless. I'm not making that argument, but that maybe the things that the technical details, the specific content knowledge you need, not all that is being conveyed well in college, or there's other ways to get to it. For you, could you have gotten your job without the degree?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, when I was 18 or 19, I was already working in tech. So I started college early when I was my senior year of high school. That's when I did the dual enrollment thing, and around that time I was doing contracting work, and that's when I really got into my career pretty young, right? And I got into that just through having those technical skills. But a lot of those technical skills were things that I just kind of built as a kid growing up. Like I had two older brothers who they are the original techies, right? A lot of the stuff we did as kids, I just kind of inherently got this. I just inherently wanted to tinker with tech, and all of it was because of gaming, right? All of it came down to gaming. Like I wanted to have the latest game. I wanted to figure out why it wasn't working. I wanted to always upgrade my computer, blah, 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 blah. I was just kind of building all these skills. And then getting into the career, I didn't use anything I learned from school, but school teaches you how to be an effective communicator. And I actually just wrote a blog piece on why you should get certified. And one of the topics I talk about, you don't discount the value of school. You discount the cost of it, right? It's absurdly expensive. But the skills that it does give you in the real world is communication skills. And certifications are kind of like the same. With certifications, they're getting way, way, way better than they've ever been, right? Especially the Google, Amazon, and Microsoft Azure certifications. They're getting hands-on. The people who write them are actual Googlers, actual people that work at Amazon stuff. They're the ones writing the exam questions. So they're pulling from real life scenarios and all that sort of stuff. And the type of work you're doing usually is pretty hands-on. But at the end of the day, it's still theoretical because you don't need to be at a job to get it. But what you are learning when you do certifications, when you do reading, like for example, in my book, like I try to talk a bit about, both the technical, the non-technical, and the philosophical components of this career path. Mm-hmm. You're learning about a series of topics that are going to make you understand something better. So when you are in that situation in the workplace, you're going to be able to communicate about the problems better, right? The same way as if I'm studying, taking a finance class and I'm studying about NPV and ROI and all these different topics, right? Maybe I'm not directly using it today, but hey, when I'm in that scenario in the real world where we're talking about some of these concepts, I'm able to kind of go back to that knowledge I gained from reading. And you're going to be a more effective communicator. And communication is like one of the most important skills in the workforce, because that's how you build influence. That's how you get projects done. That's how you lead. That's how you rally people together. That's how you identify what some of the biggest problems are. If you're building, let's just say you're on the Instagram team, and you're trying to build a feature for this new shop that they're developing, right? How are it's communications really going to help your engineers understand how to build what they need to build.
The communication skills piece, though, is important because it's something I tell my students. In most cases, English class is not the class that gets you your job. English class is the class that gets you your promotion, because the best communicators are the ones that are going to advance, right? If you're the one with the best technical skills, they need you in the technical job. If you have good technical skills and great communication skills, that's the thing that can help to elevate you, because now you have the ability to lead other people, or you have the ability to communicate about what you're going to do. Do you think that is the real value of school?
Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of the value in school is really building on your cognitive functions, building on your ability to problem solve, memorize, all that sort of stuff, which has come in handy for even my certifications. Like I've got 14 now. I got one of them when I was which is like the gold standard for cybersecurity when I was like 24. Right. And I didn't have 10 years of experience, but what I did have is I had a lot of discipline. I was able to critically think about the problems. I was able to actually spend time researching, and schooling, certifications are more hands-on, right? Especially if you pair it with a lab, you get to sort of build the theoretical piece, but then you get to get some exposure to labs. Same thing in school, right? You get to read about things, but you also get to do exercises. But you're still not in the fire. And at the workforce, right? Anywhere in your career, whether you're building a company, whether you're building a startup, whether you're, an analyst at whatever, being thrown in the fire is really what's going to help you understand how to solve problems. Being thrown in the fire is when everything you've learned in the past, you have to actively use it, right? You're in it now. And when you think about drawing back to those cognitive skills as you're starting to problem solve in the real world, this is where a lot of schooling helps.
We're at the point, so I'm going to ask you the question that this is my favorite question to ask people, because we're sort of connecting what you think is useful in school to what you're doing in your job, and then how sort of the certifications are providing both credentials but some technical skills and how to communicate about those technical details. If you were put in charge of a school, like let's say a high school, or you could do middle school, or whatever if you want, but if you were given a budget and very little government oversight, like as long as kids are learning and not dying, like you're cool, what to you would be the ideal school?
That's actually a really good question. And I'll preface this to say there's literally no one size fits all solution here, because all of our industries are vastly different. You don't want to box someone into any one path, because this world, if you look at the people all around us, we've got people who love art, we've got artists, we've got analysts, we've got people that are good managers, and people that are inspirational, and people that are very technical, right? We've got all these different paths in life. So there's not really ever a one size fits all. But what the idea of building a school that works for everybody is kind of going back to why I really respect you a lot. You were able to connect with people all across the board, from the top learners to the people who are struggling and don't want to be there. And in school, we have to think about that. Our system, right? Our system is designed for students, only studious people, to pass, right? We've got this really structured regiment around the courses you have to take and the requirements and all that stuff. But when we're not enabling students to come with their passion and create, and one of the biggest you're going to see with this transition to automation, more and more jobs continue to get automated. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have less jobs in the future. What it means is that the types of jobs we're going to have in the future are going to evolve greatly. Like, you would have never had a dog walker, 100 years ago, right?
Right, yeah. But I think it was maybe Andrew Yang's book that said something like, I think it was The War on Normal People. They made the estimate that 70, I forget the number, it was like 70% of the students who graduate high school this year are going to have a job in 10 or 15 years that doesn't exist today. Like, exactly. Things are about to change. So it's not that you're not going to have a job, but you're going to have a job that not only you didn't prepare for, but that literally doesn't even exist in this moment.
Yeah.
Like, and so if you're thinking about it from that angle, and by the way, I fully agree. I think like you're onto something here. How do you create an institution that can help to do that? Like, to prepare people for something, but we don't even know what it's going to be yet.
Yeah. So one thing I love doing is I love to sit and talk about the future. I love to talk about blockchain, because blockchain, you're going to see, a couple years from now, 10 years from now, whatever, more and more developers are adopting it. More and more people are building all of the foundation for it. It's going to be a real thing that we're going to be leveraging. Mm-hmm. I love to talk about the future, because when you start to talk about what the future is going to look like, you start to spark up the minds of people who then think about what some of the problems are that they're going to have to solve, right? So thinking about it, an institution that works for the people, I think it's an institution that's based off of passion. And granted, a lot of kids don't necessarily understand their passion. So maybe from a young age, there's still some bit of structure to help people get exposure to where they want to go. I know that's the idea of going to college. You go to college, you get a major and whatnot. But even within our schools, I mean, there are some core skills that kids don't have exposure to, right? Like coding and all these sort of things that are very real in today's world. And they're the Board of Education needs to start thinking about what's really changing in the workforce and how to prep these kids for it. But then also creating an institution where kids are empowered to create, where like it's a blank canvas. It's a blank canvas with problems, and kids have to come in to try to solve the problem. And there's no right answer here. Um, there's no right answer. It's let me spark the minds of all these kids to start thinking bigger, start thinking creatively. Creativity is probably going to be the most in-demand skill in the next generation of kids, because software and coding and all these things are going to continue even being automated. So there's going to be really, really highly sophisticated jobs. And then there's going to be a lot of jobs that are very focused on creativity and connecting and empathy, right, and all these other, things that we've neglected.
Yeah.
Today.
And a guy I worked with, he just retired, I think last year or the year before, Ron Richards, who was a social studies teacher, like legendary debate coach, won all these like state titles and all this stuff. And a student did a project where she interviewed a bunch of her teachers for like her graduation project. And she talked to me, she talked to him, she talked to a few other people, and I got to see the final thing. And she asked, how is school different? And, this guy has been a teacher for like 40 years. And he said, well, you got the internet. And she's like, and he goes, that's it. School's pretty much the same as when I went, except you have the internet. And I thought, like, wow, like if that was not a devastating criticism of what we're doing, that we're like, well, you have the internet, but we haven't changed, that much else. There's a big push towards what people call like, inquiry-based learning or, project-based learning. I like how you say problem. Problem-based learning is, let's define, like, here's an issue, go ahead and figure out how to solve it. Does that, how do you facilitate that? Like, is that like a school that just sort of has a bunch of sort of teachers become mentors and like maker space kind of things? Like,
Yeah.
Do we have a computer lab, we have a maker space, we have whatever? Or do you think that this could still be done with a semi-traditional sort of course load? Like, do you still take the different classes, or do we sort of tear down those walls and just say the adults in the building can sort of advise you and mentor you from these different perspectives, and you have the freedom to run with it? Because I've heard people say that, and I'm like, that sounds really cool. I think that's probably really messy to run. Like, I feel like that's, I think it's awesome as long as those kids aren't trying to apply to college, because the college is going to be like, well, what the hell did you do? Like, you don't have a report card. What are we supposed to do with that? And I think that's one of the big struggles that we face is, how do you innovate in education and not leave those kids hanging because colleges still want the traditional thing, or your boss still does? What do you do?
So there's just some just came to mind, right? So there's an art to being able to paint the big picture, and then also solve the smaller all the problems that it takes to get there, right? And in school, we don't have the big picture. We have, you want to learn accounting, all right, we're going to start from the bare bones and teach you every single thing of accounting, right? But imagine a problem where you give students, it's an accounting class, and say, hey, the problem is you're an accounting firm, you're a company, and you have made, X amount in revenue and blah, 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 and you need to figure out how to balance your budget. And these kids come into this and like, what the hell does any of this even mean? I have no idea. And it's like, okay, this is the problem in the real world. Now let's build up on all of the sort of pieces that sort of get you to understanding how this problem works. Same way, like you're doing your taxes. Imagine you're in a class and an assignment is like a massive project is like, hey, you need to do your taxes. This is something kids don't learn in school, right? Kids are probably like, what the hell? How do I do my taxes? Well, it's like, okay, now we got to figure that out, right?
Right.
Here's the problem. Now we're going to figure out every single thing we need to learn to get you to solve that. So when you do get into the real world and you do encounter these problems, you understand how all these little building blocks all funnel into solving the bigger picture issue.
Yeah. So, okay. I mean, with a clear end goal in mind, if you pick the right problem, all the other skills and content knowledge can sort of backfill as necessary. And if nothing else, it provides more clarity for the student in terms of what's the purpose. Why am I doing this? I'm sitting in class learning about the War of 1812 going, who cares? But there are times when it's useful to have the perspective. If you start at the end point and work back, maybe that shifts the way, one, that students learn, but two, the interest that people have in it.
Think about computer science. So think about math. Math is so integral to computer science, right? Dude, I wish I paid more attention in math class when I was younger. I wish I did better in math. I wish I built those skills. But when I was doing math, it was just mindless. It was like, what the hell am I learning all this stuff for, right? Yeah. This means nothing to me right now. But had someone came and said, hey, we're going to build an application that can process, that can process, I don't know, all of the vaccines for, a state, right?
Right.
And you need to figure out how you can balance, all of the different counties that need to get involved, all of the users that need to get involved, all this stuff. We need to mathematically start to solve this problem, right? Then I'd be like, oh, okay, this starts to make a little bit more sense. Now we're building all of the math and then the
Yeah,
algorithm.
you can visualize and see how to use it. That's when I started being bad at math, was when my teacher stopped being able to tell me how I was going to use it. Like
Yeah,
I was good at math until somewhere in like algebra 2, and then I stopped getting clear answers on how I could apply it. And I don't know if it's just, I gave up or whatever, but right around then was when my math prowess sort of dropped
yeah,
off, just because
yeah,
I couldn't visualize a way to apply it,
right.
and doing the problem on paper really didn't seem
Yes.
all that interesting or useful, right?
Yeah.
And so having that connection point, I think, would be good. So okay, so time wise, we're going to work towards a conclusion here, but I'll kick it to you. Is there anything, we covered a lot, and I love you went big picture on some of that? That's great. Is there anything you'd like to sort of talk a little bit more about or provide some detail on that we either moved past too fast, or you just want to
Uh,
clarify?
so I think the key thing that I want people to start thinking about is we live in a world where humans population is growing so fast. I mean, we had 1 billion people, I think it was what, like a couple hundred years ago, and now we're at 8 billion, right? So the world is rapidly, rapidly, rapidly growing. And we're coming up on an interesting time where people are becoming more polarized in some sense, where you've got people who are on different sides of the spectrum, right? We don't have anyone who's really thinking about rationality. We have to start thinking about rationality when we're trying to solve problems, because people are all going to have different belief systems. But rationality is the bridge that kind of helps us solve problems, right? If something is even 1% more rational than the other, then clearly it's the right answer, right? And a lot of people in this world, one thing I really love about Google is very big on data. Every problem we solve is all about using data to solve your problems, using data to influence, your rationality, back up your belief system. And one thing I've noticed in many other companies in my career is that a lot of people make decisions based off of their gut instinct, based off of how they feel emotionally, based off of how it affects them, right? No one thinks about the rational answer about problems. And so as we're sort of crafting this future for kids to kind of learn and grow and become leaders, we have to start teaching these skills. Kids, how do you rationalize a problem? How do you actually truly make someone feel equal? How do you actually approach a problem unbiased and think about everyone that you're affecting when you're solving a problem, right? A lot of people don't think about the bigger impacts. And in this book, in the Cloud Architect book, I know the book is designed for a very specific set of folks. It's the folks that are proceeding going for this certification. But I've challenged this thought of doing technical learning, because the book is not all about how you can build a massive infrastructure on Google Cloud. The book is about how you can think about problem solving with Google Cloud. So there is the technical components that get you prepped for the exam. There is non-technical components that get you prepped for being in meetings with stakeholders, with clients, with customers, dealing with real people in real life.
Mhm.
And then there's the philosophical components of what is the overall impact of this technology in the world that we live in, and how can we truly build a world that is more inclusive of everybody, that helps us grow, that helps us progress. And when humans get from 8 billion to 16 billion people, you, cloud architect, you are the leader, you are the person that is shaping the future of this world. You have so much power. You're not just behind a computer. Drone operator, you have so much power. You're not just sitting behind a computer playing a game. You are the person that has to think about your actions and about how it affects other people. Military commander, school leader, whoever you are in this world, think about how your decisions are affecting other people. And that's going to really help us get to a state where we can truly build a world that serves us.
It's funny because I'm not like a I'm like a halfway numbers guy. Like I like to look at the big numbers and then go with my gut based on them. And that probably, makes you cringe a little bit. But there's a book that I read a couple years ago, and I had students. It was one of a series of like book choices, and I think it's Annie Duke, the professional poker player, wrote a book called Thinking in Bets, and you would probably love it. It's what you just talked about. She's like, if everyone in the world thought like a poker player, we would do things so much better, because everything is a matter of like, what is the probability of, like, she basically runs everything in her life like it's kind of a big math problem. And she goes, if you were to think, essentially think in bets, that we would do better faster at so many things, even if it's counterintuitive sometimes. And I was like, I read the book and it blew my mind. So I was like, okay, like I could do a little bit more of that, right? and if you're preparing people for jobs in important industries and maybe some changing technologies, it's probably a good way to approach it. Is that part of what you think about, say, in terms of the Certs Guy, thinking about your role, your growing role as a mentor? How much of that is supporting people just accessing the resources to get certifications versus how much of that is sort of doing the thinking piece, helping people to think about these choices better?
So, as I started building the Certs Guy, this all started when, I got to a point in my career where I feel like, from a skills perspective, obviously learning is forever, but, I'm going to keep going at the pace that I'm going, right? I'm going to keep learning as much as I can learn. I'm going to keep growing. I'm going to keep asking other people for insight. I'm going to keep asking my mentors for advice. But when you get to a point, you start to think about, okay, how can I truly become a leader in this space, right? The one way you do it is by helping other people. When you start to help other people, you start to realize that, hey, if you treat everyone else around you really well, if you take care of other people, if you help people out, then A, it's going to help you grow as an inspiration for others. And B, it's also going to help other people then start to share their insights and their knowledge with the world as well. So if we really want to create a world that's progressive and that continues to evolve positively, the Certs Guy is about, how can I help share my thoughts to other people who can, if there's anything valuable there, they can get from it. If there's anything that helps them grow in their careers, they can get from there. But the end of it, at the end of all of this, I want all of these people who follow my blog to take their knowledge and then go help someone else. Take everything you've learned here today. If you got a certification and you landed a kick-ass new job, take all that knowledge and just help one person. And if everyone just helps one person, it's a domino effect that'll trigger a massive change in the way we think in this world. And so, yeah, I'm focused on tech. Yeah, I'm focused on certifications. But really, what I'm trying to think about is how I can inspire a generation of thinkers who can take all their knowledge and share it with the people next to them and help grow together.
I love it. I love it. And that's, I'm going to butcher it. That's the Henry Adams quote, a teacher affects eternity. He never knows where his influence stops. What people don't know is he was actually talking about bad teachers and how bad they screw it up for everyone. But, a million teachers have that on an inspirational poster in their classroom. Because if you think about it in the positive sense, if you can influence a person positively and that person then influences, whether it's one or it's 100, right? It's sort of got to start somewhere. And so I love what you're doing, because I think that that's what I think more people should do. If you have something to offer and you can help people, you do it. And whether you get a few or a few hundred or whatever it may be, in the end, there was a net gain, right? There's a benefit both to the individuals and to sort of the larger community as a whole. So in addition to the general certification talk, are there any other reasons that you're sort of pushing the Certs Guy and the certsguy.com as a brand and as an effort? What else are you trying to accomplish there?
Yeah, no, so kind of going back to, when I mentioned that post I made on LinkedIn, right? I was just so busy, bogged down writing the book. I didn't really have time to sit there and reflect on it. But as I got more time, as I finished wrapping up the first edits of the book, I started to reflect and I started to think about this. I've got a lot of folks, a lot of friends, colleagues, family members, all these sort of people that I've built really strong relationships with, that I've got a lot of love and respect for. And I love that. I love the fact that, I've had all these people that met me at some point in my life that still remember that we had I had some sort of long lasting impression on. And I realized, I was like, hey, wait a minute, like Afghans, we don't have a good rep in this world, right? But the people that know me and the people that know that I'm Afghan, when they think of an Afghan person, they think of me. They don't think of what they hear on TV, right? And if we want to really make a change in how we are represented in the world, we have to actually step up and we have to be more active. We have to be more visible and whatnot. And so the Certs Guy also is an opportunity for me to show the world that, hey, you know what? There are people who aren't white men who are authoring books and kicking ass in the world and helping other people grow. There's actually people who look like me, who come from my background. And so the idea is that, I want everyone to think about, if you're not going to speak for yourself in this world, who's going to speak for you, right? The news, right? Who's going to speak for you? Who's going to talk about who you are, especially if you come from a diverse or underrepresented or marginalized background, right? Who is going to speak for you? So the more active we are in this world, the more we put ourselves out there, we show all the amazing things we're doing. We help other people where we can. We show the world that, hey, you know what? We are capable of contributing to society in the best ways possible, and we're doing it. Then you're going to inspire everyone around you to start to think differently about you, your people, your background. And that's going to, obviously help progression in the long run for your culture, for your gender, for your ethnic background, your sexual orientation, whatever it may be. So I am proceeding to build the Certs Guy as a means to show the world that, hey, I'm investing not just in this industry, but I'm investing in all of the folks who do come from diverse and underrepresented backgrounds, and we're all going to grow together.
Awesome. People first. I love it. Is the purpose of education essentially to do that? Like, is that, if we were to put it in the simplest terms possible, like if I said you have to give me like a sentence or two, is education really just the tools we use to positively influence people like that? Or does it have to be something more formal?
I think when it comes to education, at the end of the day, education is giving the framework for people to positively make an impact in the world, right? The tools will change every day. The tools change all the time. But the framework of thinking, we're using all those skills, comprehension, memorization, problem solving, et cetera, rationality. The framework that we build is really what's going to influence a positive growth in this evolution of human beings, and especially at a time where there are 8 billion of us here and there are so many smart people in the world. It'll be a shame if we don't actually start focusing on how we can help up-level everyone around us, because we are better as a whole.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And I think that's a healthy way, I think, of looking at everything we do in our lives, is sort of how can we use our efforts to positively influence those around us. Just sort of for fun now, wrap this thing up. I always ask for a couple of books or movies or things like that you enjoy and would recommend to others. Obviously, Google Cloud Certified Professional Cloud Architect is at the top of the list. That's your book. But in terms, and it could be professional education stuff, but also maybe just for fun, what are a few books or movies that you think listeners should check out?
Definitely the Google Cloud Professional Cloud Architect is one of them.
Yeah. I mean,
no,
anybody who doesn't read that is a loser.
Exactly. Come on. Yeah. No, if you're in tech and it's something you want to do, then definitely even if it's something you're remotely interested in learning, you don't have to dive into all the technical parts. There's a lot of philosophical topics I talk about. For example, dude, I'm like, by the way, I'm like Bernie Sanders, man. I love Bernie Sanders, but I'm like, Bernie, you're going to ask me a question about how I'm going to, what my answer is, and I'm not going to give you my answer. I'm just going to
We'll get you back to it. It's
yeah.
Good.
So, I do talk a lot about, a lot of different of these ways of thinking in the book. Even like using tech in a moral sense, right? In I think it was last year when the George Floyd protests started happening, one of the Amazon facial recognition APIs, it's called Recognition, was basically removed. It was put on a moratorium from use with the police forces because the facial recognition algorithm was improperly tagging African Americans as criminals, right?
Right.
Because they didn't have enough training data for African Americans. They probably didn't have a team with representation from African Americans, and I do want to talk about representation in a bit. They don't have a team of African Americans that probably were working on, the API, right? They didn't think about all these blind spots when they were building this tool that impacts lives and stuff, right? So, in this book that I do talk about, I talk about some of these examples and how, really understanding how to approach a problem with the right tools, with the right framework is going to help build a better world for us all. But beyond this book, Sapiens was definitely one where, I went through many years of my life only knowing the amount of history that I've learned in school, which, I probably didn't pay attention to. When I dove into this book, it really helped me start thinking that way, 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 way bigger than myself. I mean, we have been on this planet, right, for like 0.002% of the existence of this planet, of this earth, right? So this book really helped me start to think well beyond the scope of what I've learned in school and start looking back in history and realizing that, hey, there's so much more out there. Let me see how I can, leverage all this new knowledge to then think about, okay, what is the next million years going to look like, right? Sapiens is a great one. A Simple Path to Wealth, is a good one. It's a good financial book for kids to dive into, just understanding, the key themes of just growing wealth. It's pay off your debt, build a rainy day fund, and do passive investing and focus on living your best life, right? I think people get too caught up in trying to gamble all the time, including myself, and we don't think about life being something that, it's long-term. You want to build for the future, right? That's always a really good one. And then aside from that, to be honest, I don't read too many books in my spare time. I'm always so busy, but and I don't watch a lot of movies either. So I don't have any good movie recommendations, but I do have show recommendations. The Wire is the greatest show of all time. Silicon Valley, if you're in tech, oh my God, it's hilarious. It's too funny. But The Wire is a really, really incredible, fascinating show because it shows so many different layers of humanity and corruption and greed and all these different problems that exist, in Baltimore for the purposes of the show. But it's just really eye-opening getting to understand some of the challenges faced by our fellow Americans and, other parts of the country and whatnot.
Yeah, I love The Wire. And by the way, I don't know if you know this, I minored in anthropology in college. I was like one class away, I think, from a second major, one or two.
Yeah.
And so I love Sapiens because it sort of did this like compressed view of all the stuff that I'd learned. And I did anthropology literally just because I was fascinated in the same ways you're talking about. And so that's been a good one, and did you read the sequel, the second one, Homo Deus?
No, and I didn't even get through Sapiens fully.
you got to do it, or get the audiobook, because I that's what I do. I have a long commute, so I listen to him. Homo Deus is awesome because he does like a near future sort of history of mankind. So he does the same thing, and he takes the same timeline he's working on, and then he projects it over the next like 50 years or 50 to 100 years. It's amazing. And yeah, and The Wire was I was reluctant at first. I had a friend who, when it was still, they were still making episodes, he was like, this is the best show you got. And I was like, yeah. And then several years later, I watched it and I was like, oh, holy crap, he was right. Like, that's one of the best TV shows I've ever seen. But, I was like by choice late to the game on that one. All right. So we're going to go ahead and wrap this thing up. This has been the ClassCast podcast with Iman Ghanizada, the Certs Guy. You can find him at www.thecertsguy.com. He's the author of the upcoming book, Google Cloud Certified Professional Cloud Architect, an all-in-one exam guide that is published through McGraw-Hill. He is doing some amazing things in the field of technology and is maybe edging his way back into a little bit of education and helping other people to achieve their goals, but whether personal or career-based. Iman, thank you for taking the time to talk today.
Of course. Thank you.